Hi, I'm Chris with Afflictor, and today we're going to talk about swamp white oaks and how to identify them. Stay tuned. Okay, so I wanted to just take a quick walk with you and just kind of give you an idea of how to identify white oaks, what the major differences are, and why that you should know the difference. First of all, right out of the gate, the white oak is definitely a preferred acorn to the white-tailed deer because it's less bitter. It has less tannins than the red oak. In fact, if you were to sample a red oak and take a bite out of it, you would see that it's much more bitter even by your taste, extremely. So you can tell that the deer would prefer that for a reason. The other reason is the white oaks are an oak that drops early, usually faster than the red oaks. So it's really easy to identify the tree by its leaves and acorns, so you know where you should probably be looking at setting up, especially early season. So we're going to take a walk down this line here. I'm going to show you in this area some swamp white oaks, and then we're going to move to another area close to here where there's some white oaks growing. I love this area because it's a property line, and often property lines have the biggest trees, right? Because everybody's afraid to cut down trees on a property line because I don't know if it's mine, I don't know if it's yours, and most often they have some old fence going through that wood and the logger's not even interested. So as we walk down here, let's take a peek at some of these oaks and I'll show you how to identify them. As we come down on this line, the first thing that you'll notice, of course, is that there's these giant oaks in here. And one of my favorites right here is you have this beautiful northern red oak right here growing right next to a white oak. And it's just a really good example of the difference between the barks. What I want to show you is something interesting, which is also proof that red oaks tend to be a little bit less preferred. If you look on the ground here, you will see that there are a lot of these immature northern red oaks coming out. Now, if you pick a leaf and you take a look at this leaf, you will see that on every tip is a bristle. Now at this stage, the northern red oak does have some similarities to the swamp white oak leaf, except for these bristles. So if we walk a little farther and we just look down here and we come up with a swamp white oak, you can see on the edge here, it looks very similar, but there's no bristles on these. And we'll get some over here that are much more easily identified. But one of the interesting things as you look around here is all of these immature plants that you see are not white oak. In fact, almost all of them are northern red oak, and in this entire area, the only swamp white oak that I can find is this one. And this is kind of neat because it's growing right next to this northern red. So you can kind of get an idea. You can see these little sharp points and these bristles and how these have these nice round lobes. And so this here is a swamp white oak that's coming up right next to a northern red oak. Now, as we come over here, we're going to look at a giant swamp white oak. This is a big tree. So when you look at this swamp white oak, you can see it has a little bit darker bark than the typical white oak, which is more gray. And you start to get into this thicker, more fissured, heavier bark. And the base is very flanged and it's massive. But as you look up the tree, you can see you'll start to get into more of that typical white oak bark where it turns gray and kind of gets into that scaly type of bark. And you get those nice leaves up there that have those rounded edge tight lobes without bristles, and that is your identifier. Now, one of the problems this time of year is showing you a swamp white oak acorn. Here we're lucky enough to see, so this is your northern red oak, and you can tell because it's squatty. The acorn doesn't, the cap doesn't come down very far, and that cap looks a little bit like snake scales. So it's a great identifier when you're looking at northern red oak. Now, this is the swamp white oak, and you can see that you lose those scales and you start going into having bumps. And in fact, a lot of times on the swamp white oak, you'll see that these bumps turn into having little filaments coming off of them. Not as crazy as you would see on some of the other white oaks, like the bur oak, where it has tons of filaments and the cap comes almost all the way over the nut. But when you're looking at a swamp white oak, the cap will come down sometimes to half, maybe even 3/4 sometimes over the nut, but it'll come down farther than it will on a regular white oak. So hopefully we can move around here and find a nut for you, but right now all we have is caps. Here's a great example of the swamp white oak leaf. Now you can see how you have lobes that were very similar from that immature northern red that I showed you, but they're nice and round and they're shallow in their fissures here, and there's no bristles. So one of the main things that you can always use to determine between reds and white is on the leaves is bristles. So reds will always have a bristle at the tip of each point. Doesn't matter if it's a pin oak, a scarlet oak, a red oak, even a shingle oak in its unusual shape will have one teeny tiny little bristle at the end of most of its leaves. But when you're looking at white oaks, you're always going to be looking for nice round lobes and shallow fissures for the swamp, deep fissures for your regular white oak, and no bristles. So let's go find some white oaks and show you what they look like. All right, so here we are in an area that has some white oaks. Now, white oaks have this nice light gray bark here, and you can see it's got these big rectangles. It's thin, it's brittle. It's not like that swamp white oak where the bark was really tough and a lot thicker and higher raised, and you have this nice gray color, and it's pretty consistent all the way up. You can see on some of the branches that it gets real flaky, but it's real easy to identify by the bark. Now, if you're running into any confusion when it comes to bark, because there are other trees with light gray bark, you can always go and look at the white oak leaves. So when we look at these leaves right here, you can see that we have these deeper fissures. So they're nice and deep. They go farther down than the swamp white oak, but they still, on those lobes, there's no bristles and they're nice and round. So you can easily say that on the white oak, you have those nice deep fissures. On swamp white oak, you have very shallow fissures, again, with just the round lobes. Now, when we look at the acorns for the white oak, it is really tough to find some acorns in here. Now, this is really close to a house, this grove of white oaks, but the deer have been coming in here 3 o'clock like clockwork and spending the whole night in here. And what they're after is this little elongated acorn right here. Now, you can see one of the discernible features right out of the gate is the fact that on this white oak, the acorn cap does not come down as far as on the swamp white oak, and even though it still has bumps, it doesn't have a lot of those small filaments that come off of it. The bumps on this are pretty much the same. They're these nice small bumps, but the cap does not extend over the nut as far. But you get these really nice elongated nuts, and this one's pretty excited here. It's ready to grow. So it's unusual in this area for that to even been on the ground long enough to have a chance to sprout. But you can see on this one here as well, typical cap formation with the stem coming off like a pipe, and that's about as far down as you're going to see a cap come on a white oak. So again, just to know the difference between white oaks and red oaks is a great idea. Now, red oaks are not going to be forgotten, but they are going to be last for the reason that they are so bitter, but also that they typically fall later. And sometimes you'll see that northern red oaks seem to have a harder time producing because it's about a 15-month cycle for them to produce. A lot of people, you'll hear them say, oh, they're an every other year nut. Well, even though they flower every year, since that's a 15-month cycle, it does take them longer. More can happen. They're more subject to wind and crazy weather and smaller crops. But then you tend to every 2 to 3 to 4 years see this bumper crop. And this year's been one of those years we've had a bumper crop of everything. It was a perfect spring. The white oaks, they only take a few months to develop their nuts. So that's typically a tree that you're going to see a good production every year. But again, a lot of factors are concerning that. Soil, temperature, spring weather, storms during early season. So it's really hard to put a finger on how a certain tree is going to do year after year. But one thing that you can be sure of, if you can find white oaks before season starts and establish yourself in them before the deer start moving, before season comes in, you're going to set yourself up for success.